On the 22nd of September, the year 2022, more than 400 members of parliament were sworn into the office, heralding the beginning of the 13th parliament. Almost 1 year down the line, we track the performance of the 13th parliament. This is coming at a time when the annual parliamentary scorecard by Mzalendo Trust has painted a negative picture of the 13th parliament. What are the misses and what are the hits? Good evening and thank you for joining us. My name is O'Brien Kimani, right on time for scorecard. Tonight our conversation revolves around the performance of the 13th parliament. Our team of experts are in the house, and also we have the data lady. She's going to take us through the numbers, what they are telling us. And as we say here, numbers do not lie, and facts are stubborn. Yambo, you have the statistics, you have the numbers, and of course, you have the voice. What are you telling us tonight?
Thank you so much, O'Brien Kimani, and thank you to our viewers back at home for making the time to join us this evening. And just as O'Brien has already alluded to, well, the performance of the 13th Parliament is in question. And that is what we are going to be discussing tonight. Not so much of numbers, but I'll be bringing you the numbers in just a short while. Well, the Kenyans, O'Brien, went to the polls on the 9th of August, that is 2022. And they had high expectations of their leaders. And one of them, which still is, we are grappling with until today, is the cost of living, you know. So they expected that those are some of the things that the members of parliament will be addressing. And so I'd like to start first of all with the basics. So what is the role of our members of parliament? You know, so the Constitution allows for the direct or indirect, representation of Kenyans. So in this case, we're talking about the Senate and the National Assembly. So that is definitely indirect representation of Kenyans through our members of parliament, the senators, the governors, and the MCAs. And their role is really representation, legislation, and also oversight. So that means, as a Kenyan, you should expect that your member of parliament should be able to represent your needs and your concerns right from the constituency level in terms of what are the special interests in those areas. And the role of the Senate, as provided in Article 96 of the Constitution, also is all about really representation in terms of counties when it comes to bills that are concerning the counties and to improve their performance in terms of also, revenue allocation and all that. So those are just a few of the roles, definitely, that both houses are supposed to play. So I've just condensed them to a few of them. Now, the scope of the 2023 parliamentary scorecard by the Mzalendo Trust, this was between September last year and to June this year. And mainly what they were doing is to analyze the contribution of our parliamentarians in terms of how many times they spoke in parliament. And remember, when they speak, they represent you. So one of the indicators or the parameters that they use is just one, in terms of the number of times that they spoke in both houses. But there are other parameters that can be used, and our guest today from the Mzalendo Trust will be able to tell us more about that, because it could be other parameters that can be used, could be, in terms of development. Some of the promises that they made, were they able to do that, their performance in terms of oversight and all that. So averagely, the members of parliament spoke 10 times, in the last 1 year. O'Brien, can you imagine someone not speaking a whole year? So the least performing 187 members of parliament who spoke between 0 to 9 times a whole year. So I don't know whether that is something that Kenyans should be proud of. So it's time to interrogate the people that you put to represent you. So if they're quiet, that means your needs are also not being highlighted. Those who spoke between 10 and 19 times are just 66, but those who spoke the most was between 40 and 49, and those only 6 members of parliament. So that is subject for debate. But what did the active members talk about? So there's food security, there is droughts, conservation of the environment, public investment initiatives, there's shortcomings of the SRC, non-performing loans, all that, vetting of the cabinet, the implementation of the CBC, and also school feeding programs. But as when I began, O'Brien, the question was, what what did Kenyans really expect their members of parliament to address? Definitely the cost of living has been one that Kenyans have been grappling with. So did that really come to the table? We'll get to know from our guests tonight. The prolonged drought is also a concern for Kenyans. Insecurity, the maize subsidies, the cost of energy, high levels of unemployment, the Shakahola massacre, just to name a few, some of the key issues that Kenyans have been grappling with. With sexual abuse in workplaces, those are some of the things that Kenyans, or at least this report was able to deduce, and climate and environment concerns, as well as police brutality, also making it to the list of issues that Kenyans have been concerned about. So let's look at the Senate. Averagely, according to this report, they spoke 41 times. So the Senate seems to perform a little bit more better than the National Assembly, and the argument there is just because of the numbers. In the Senate, we have 67 members. That is both the nominated and the elected, as compared to the National Assembly, where we have 349, and that is both the elected and nominated. So does that mean because of the few numbers they're able to perform, to speak more in the Senate or not? We'll get to know about that. But only one senator, we didn't get the name, who spoke less than 10 times. But generally, what it's saying is that the performance of the Senate was far much better. But let's look at the business that they considered in the 13th Parliament in the past 1 year. 31 bills were considered, and in the National Assembly. Okay, the bill, just to bring us up to speed, is just a proposed law that seeks to introduce either a new legislation or amendment, or even repeal an existing one. Now, out of the 35, I'll just name a few. The finance bill, this one we are very conversant with. A lot of Kenyans did weigh in on this, and this is the bill, which is an act right now that was to raise the revenue for the 2023-2024 budget that was at 3.6 trillion shillings. There's also the county government additional allocation bill that was passed, and this was just to provide additional revenue to the counties at 43.82 billion shillings, and this was to address the issue of stalled projects in the counties. Also, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, you know that electoral reforms is something that Kenyans have been concerned about, and this bill was passed just to review the composition of the IBC selection panel. Again, in the Senate, we have 7 of the bills which have gone through the public participation and to go to the second reading. 15 of them are at the second reading, 5 at committee, and 3 have been passed. And the 3 actually are just the same as what the National Assembly already dealt with, and I've already mentioned the county government additional allocation bill. There's also the independent, the IBC amendment bill 2022 that was to alter the composition of the selection panel, and of course the division of revenue bill that was also considered in the Senate. So, Brian, those are some of the House business that the 13th Parliament was able to perform. But our question today is to our viewers, and we hope that you can actually interact with us on Facebook, on Twitter, and we're asking you, has your area member of Parliament performed to your expectation? We want to hear from you. If it's a yes, kindly do explain to us. If it's a no, also explain to us. So thank you so much once again for joining us. So, Brian, it's back to you now to introduce our panel of experts.
Well, very good, and thank you very much indeed, Marie Yambo. As always, we appreciate your input and, of course, your boldness when it comes to statistics. Tonight, of course, Marie Yambo has said it all. We just want to look at the performance of the 13th Parliament. And before we proceed, I just want to make, a quick correction. The 13th Parliament was sworn into office on the 8th of September 2022. And how dare me forget that, bearing in mind that I was one of the people who was bringing you live coverage of that event. And of course, there are 349 members of Parliament and 69 senators. So, and their role, according to the Constitution of Kenya, Article 95 and Article 96, is to legislate. Just a minute. Let me get you the right information. The role is to represent, legislate, and oversight. That is the role of the Senate as well as the National Assembly. For the last 9 years, Mzalendo Trust has been releasing what has come to be known as the Parliamentary Scorecard. A ranking of the most talkative members of parliament and the least talkative, the number of bills that have been deliberated and the number of acts that have been passed. And just last week, or last month actually, they released their report for the year 2023. Well, this is a report for the last 9 months, or 8 months actually. And so it's also going to form part of this conversation. It is going to embolden our conversation tonight. And of course, we're not just looking at the parliamentary scorecard by Mzalendo Trust. We're also looking at the bill tracker, which is on the website of both the National Assembly as well as the Senate. So those two are going to help us in this conversation. As always, we have a guest, and tonight we're joined by Lois Mwakamba. She's a communication manager at Mzalendo Trust, joining us tonight. Thank you very much indeed, Mwakamba, for your time.
Thank you for having me here.
Very good indeed. And next to Mwakamba, we have Professor Fred Ogola, a governance expert as well as an economist and a regular face on this show. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Brian.
Very good. And the lady who disappeared on Tuesday, actually, we have Whitney Micheni. She is a political economist. Micheni, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Would you mind to tell us where you were?
Well, thank you, Brian, and also a good evening to your viewers. Thank you for that question. I traveled to the United Arab Emirates last week. I visited the capital, which was Abu Dhabi, and I also went to Dubai for some business, but also for some rest and recovery, and that was much needed.
I love your life.
Thank you. God's grace. God's grace.
Well, thank you very much, and of course, we are glad to have you tonight. I want to first of all to start with Lois Mwakamba. First of all, bring us to speed how you generate the annual parliamentary scorecard and why we should hold that document in the light of truth.
Yeah. So like Ms. Yambo mentioned that the scorecard, the way we do it as Mzalendo Trust, we look at the contributions made in plenary, which is just one of the parameters that you can gauge the performance of your member of parliament. And why we chose this approach is because of the 3 roles that you've mentioned: representation, legislation, and oversight. The plenary is kind of the ring where majority of this work happens. So as an MP, you speaking in parliament is very essential because you're able to represent your constituents' interest, whether you're debating a motion, a statement, a bill. You're able to also table legislation that is representative of your constituents' needs. So through you, because power has been delegated to you by the constituents, you're able to front legislation that would be addressing some of these issues they're facing. And thirdly, if you look at the, for example, the matter of vetting, all of this vetting is done by committees, right? But eventually the reports make it to plenary where members have to vote in agreement or in rejection of said report. So once again, the attendance and
they debate and then they vote.
Yes, and so the presence of your member of parliament is essential for such things, for them to voice your interest, for them to represent and even negate in some cases where you feel as an MP that a candidate that has been fronted by the executive does not meet the threshold to occupy a certain office. It's important for you to be present and state these facts.
So how do you collect that information? Do you have representation in parliament, or how do you do things?
So Mzalendo is an independent institution and partisan, of course, but this information is publicly available on Parliament website, which we have to give them a good kudos for trying to be more open and making information very available and accessible to citizens. So all of this information is publicly available on the website. Yeah.
So this is aggregated data or information from both the Senate and the National Assembly.
That's correct.
So you go to their website, you look at this information, which is posted there,
yes,
I think on a monthly basis.
Actually on a weekly basis.
On a weekly basis,
yeah, which we have to give props to Parliament for being very proactive in providing this information in a timely manner. Yeah.
And then you use that information, you analyze.
Yes, we analyze and
then you come up with
the results now that we have published last week. Yes.
Who is responsible for funding your activities?
Well, we are donor funded. But we like to emphasize that we are non-partisan, and our activities do not lean on any side or favor anyone, and so whatever we put out is very factual, and it's just to serve the citizens' needs, that we are the watchers of the watchdog. Yes. The watchers of the watchdog. Yes.
And so the report that you present, it is not altered in any way. It is as it is received or downloaded from the websites of the National Assembly and the Senate. So it's a true reflection of the information that is there.
Yes.
Very good. I want to hear these from Prof. This report that is generated annually by Mzalendo Trust, I mean, it has been generating a lot of reactions with some members of parliament, saying that it is not the true reflection of the happenings in Parliament. Do you agree with their sentiments, or is just a way of justifying their business?
Yeah, first of all, you know that in any research, there is, as a scholar, there is what is called triangulation. And triangulation is whereby when you have one way to collect data, you need to have other ways to confirm, if you like, the best English is called corroborate, that this data is collected, is self-reporting by Parliament, which is one source, and she says they rely wholly and fully on it. That means that it has what's called threat to validity, validity threat, because it may not be valid, because when our self-report, we tend to be biasly saying a certain report. So maybe there must be another way to verify, and that's why normally we recommend other ways to report. So members of Parliament could be right by looking at the analysis of it, but if they're using the report from Parliament, then they should not be blaming the Trust for their report. But me, I can question the report because self-reporting tend to be more positively biased towards the person who presents it. And there could be some ways on which, if they rely fully on that report, it might not hold water. Because if you look at the statement, she says, oversight, legislate, and represent. What in that report shows oversight? Just telling me you've spoken 10 times in Parliament, all that you have attended how many parliamentary meetings, doesn't really give oversight, because what's happening here? We have many things happening outside Parliament. Corruption is always not happening in Parliament. There must be some other issues that might call for oversight. And I'm sure if Parliament was able to state in their statement how many issues have they stopped from happening, we have seen that most of the things presented to Parliament have passed as per they were presented. For example, the cabinet, proposed cabinet, there was no one who was rejected there, in spite of the fact that I had parliamentarians arguing about serious issues with the candidate proposal, then later passing them as they were. I've seen also vetting taking place of very senior state officials, also people mentioning very serious statements. In fact, one state official even told Parliament that he cannot give them answers of the question they asked. And I think that I remember when Haji was being interviewed, he said, I cannot tell you how much is my worth. Then later it came. So there are so many issues there that I don't see that has been done in oversight. But nevertheless, I would like to encourage Mzalendo to find other means and ways on which they can verify what the Parliament is reporting in their website, because there's no organization in the world that means will report wrongly about themselves in their own website.
And what Prof is raising, I mean, has been raised in the past. I mean, if you're going to pick the information as posted by the National Assembly, as posted by Senate, and then you compile that report, do you give it an extra input? Like, do you analyze this data? Do you get your data from also second or third parties, or it is reported as it is?
So maybe what I should correct is Parliament provides the information in terms of the Hansard, the Hansard reports. Then what Mzalendo does is it goes through all the Hansard records and combs through and picks out the contributions made by parliamentarians. So something you'd note is I could have, if I'm a member of Parliament and I say point of order, and whatever I say after that is not very substantive, on the Hansard it would still record that I have spoken. But what Mzalendo does is it picks out what the Member of Parliament has spoken about during that period, so that it's substantive input that is considered. Then secondly, on saying how do we prove oversight, like you rightfully mentioned, there are motions, statements, you call it petitions, questions that have been debated, and those were included in the report as well. We highlighted the statistics in terms of numbers, what was covered during the period, and what were the dominant issues that came out during that time. And of course, we were able to see that certain statements came that were responsive to issues that were happening in the country. I mean, we saw the formation of an ad hoc committee to investigate the Shakahola massacre, for example. As to whether or not it's effective, that's a question on its own. But then maybe the conversation we should be having is Parliament proactive or reactive? Do situations happen for them to then now bring table issues in plenary, or do they actually exercise the oversight role and pick out these issues and address them beforehand, before it's a tragedy? We
should be coming to that question,
yes,
you know, in a moment, but we're trying to set the ground for this conversation. And I want to hear this from Whitney. Should we swallow the Mzalendo Trust parliamentary scorecard hook, line and sinker?
Thank you, O'Brien. Thank you for that question. I believe not, because we all know that only about 70% of what goes on in Parliament, most of what goes on in Parliament, actually, what I mean is most of that happens in the committee stages, meaning what happens in the plenary is about 30% of all that parliamentarians do. So if you're looking at the contributions of parliamentarians in the plenary session, where all the 349 members, that's a very small percentage of the work that they actually do, be it in the legislation or oversight or representation. So I believe that the panacea of all this should be, what Mzalendo can do is by getting a committee Hansard. We should be checking what the committees are discussing, because I do believe that that is where most of the issues of Kenyans could be covered. In about the plenary sessions, I do not believe that the contributions in plenary are anything to go by. Yes.
Do you do that? Do you follow the discussions at the committee level? Because as she has rightly put it, I mean, at the committee stage, this is where the chewing of the meat and bone, you know, happens.
That is true. The challenge that we've been having with analyzing committee work is that in terms of access to that information, whether it's the Hansard, whether it's the committee reports, at least the committee reports have been accessible on the website, for example, but they have not created that provision, and it's become a case of an access to information request that you have to put to Parliament to get this information. So that is a challenge that we are having Mzalendo as an institution, but also citizens. This is information that should be easily accessible to them. So again, how open is our Parliament? Still a lot of work in progress.
And how significant is that challenge? And how does it affect the final outcome of your report?
I guess it's just you miss out on context and content, especially when they have those sessions where they summon public officials to answer to certain issues, because those are the nitty-gritties that we need. Because if you're investigating a matter, say maybe corruption at KPLC, this is the kind of information that Kenyans need, because at the end of the day, if there are culprits that need to be fronted, then this is the information that should be made available. But if I can give you an example, For example, in the last parliament, the 12th parliament, if you may remember, there was an ad hoc committee formed to investigate the medical equipment system for the UHC. They went for a whole investigation for almost a year plus. Taxpayers' money has been used. They came up with a report. The report was tabled and it was rejected. But you see, Kenyans needed to know who are involved in any funny business involving the scheme, who was involved and who needs to be implicated and who needs to be held culpable. We did not get that information. So these investigations and all of this work being done at committee, if it does not see the light of the day, then we don't see the impact of it. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I was just, we have so many, especially for the role of parliament, the most important, of course, the three, which are the core mandates, which is legislation, oversight and representation. But I think the issue of oversight is very important. I think Mzalendo Trust would be doing us a great favor by showing us some reports from some oversight committees, be it the public investment committees or the public accounts committees, and there are also other like 4 oversight committees. I think those are the critical issues that Kenyans need to see, but when it comes to plenary contributions, as I've said before, I do believe that that is a very minor part of the business of parliament.
Before we go for the break, I want to hear this, Prof. I mean, is it possible that you know, since the parliament was or came into the office, you know, that in the parliament, is it possible that, you know, according to this report by Mzalendo, there are some members of parliament who have never uttered a single word in parliament? Is it possible for that to happen?
Yeah, it's highly possible. We, you can see actually report shows that it is. It's possible that you can, the numbers are huge. Some of them, if you look at it, don't even understand the standing orders. I saw even some other members lecturing other members that we don't have opposition in parliament, we only have majority and minority. You could see them even teaching each other just what are the standing orders. So if you don't know the standing orders, O'Brien, how do you stand and speak? You know, sometimes you can go to a place you have to learn. So because it's just like 1 year, some of them will start speaking maybe the 3rd year once they have seen how things go on in parliament, and some of them are very new. Remember that.
So it's still a learning curve.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I'm sure this that's why I'm trying to say is that how do people elect some members of parliament who don't even know standing orders? And you just listen to the proceedings. How many often, I'm sure Mzalendo Trust has to record, how many times do the speakers say you are out of order, honorable, you are out of order, honorable? The number of times are just too many. So then if you're in that parliament, you'll be afraid of being called out of order. And if you're out of order all the time, I'm sure once you've been told you're out of order, Mzalendo should not score them for having spoken, because if you're out of order, you have not contributed anything.
Very good. I mean, I want you to hold your thoughts there, because we need to take a short break, and then thereafter we should come back with more conversation. You're watching The Scorecard live from Broadcasting House. At O'Brien Kimani is my Twitter handle, at KBC Channel 1, and at KBC or KBC Channel 1 is our Facebook page. You watch this conversation. We're also live streaming on YouTube. So we're taking a short break thereafter. We'll be back with more conversation. Stay right here.
August on Magical Scenes.
A big number of wildlife migration than there before. It started on the 14th of July.
So I can tell you that the season is looking pretty good.
A combination of wildlife and cultural tourism.
Sasa ni culture yanaonyesha nguo ya Maasai.
Magical Scenes, only on KBC Channel 1.
Shamsa mke wa Zito. Zito linaniambia kuwa hana mke, mimi sitaki kujua.
Kiza Jamal. Shamsa is my wife. Achana naye, sawa?
Zito kufa kuzikana.
Zuri. Zuri.
She hasn't just taken this title, she's absolutely obliterated the whole field. 3:52.96.
It's a big stage, big names and big expectations. An immersive celebration of athleticism. More than 2,000 athletes from over 200 countries will compete in 49 events. Drawing inspiration from past memorable outings, Team Kenya is looking ahead for a remarkable feat in the forthcoming World Athletics Championship in Budapest, Hungary, in Central Europe. Witness the wonders from Budapest, Hungary on 19th through to the 27th of August, live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1. KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner.
Live from Broadcasting House, Nairobi, Kenya. This is KBC English Service.
Welcome to Beat Time Show, the very best of the 80s and 90s. Me, John Korani, JK.
Timeless music hits across the decades.
This is the place to be after you've had a tough day. Here we celebrate love and life.
Just watch. The sound of KBC English Service.
I'm the host Caroline Wangishi, Carol Gatata Moshero.
My name is Geoffrey Mongai B.
News, information and entertainment. KBC English Service, Kenya's official national radio.
Yawi hayawi mwishowe huwa. Kituo chako unachokienzi cha Minto FM kinatimiza miaka 12 tangu kilipoanza. Ili kuadhimisha siku hii, tunawaalika mashabiki wetu kujumuika nasi katika msururu wa roadshow utakaofanyika ndani ya kaunti ya Nyamira. Kutakuwa na burudani na vichekesho. Alhamisi tarehe 17 mwezi huu wa Agosti, msafara wa Minto FM utaanzia Kijauri, Keroka, Rigoma, Kemera, Kebirigo na kumalizia siku Nyaramba. Ijumaa tarehe 18 msafara huu utaanzia Ekerenyo, Ikonge, Nyamusi, Mawawa, Miruka, Nyamaya na kumalizia Nyabite. Jumamosi tarehe 19 tutatamatisha maadhimisho yetu kwa ibada ya shukrani katika kanisa la Nyamira Central SDA kuanzia saa 3 asubuhi. Njoo ukutane na watangazaji wako unaowaenzi. Minto ata 12 Gusi Neaito.
Welcome back. You're watching the Scorecard live from Broadcasting House. The topic of conversation this evening is the performance of the 13th Parliament against the report by the Mzalendo Trust, which was issued, was it last week or last week but one? It was last week, to give, interesting perspective about the performance of both the Senate and the National Assembly. And, of course, as you saw, the report was opposed by, certain quarters of politicians. Yambo, do you want to take us through the comment section?
Yes, indeed, O'Brien. We have viewers who are actually interacting with us on Facebook. And the question we had asked you is, has your Member of Parliament, performed to your expectations? And so you were supposed to give us your views on that particular question. And on Facebook, Abednego Kirwa says, to be honest, we Kenyans elected our leaders based on political dance and song. So essentially what Abednego is saying, that he's not seeing really any difference in terms of the performance of his Member of Parliament. He didn't see where he is actually based. Teacher Tracy says, yes, he's doing a great job. Fred Ikana, thank you for continuously serving Shinyalu electorates diligently. And, okay, well, wishing Mheshimiwa a happy birthday there. So that is Teacher Tracy. Talmon Kipkwai Chegon says, Honorable Joseph Teacher Tonui, MP Kuresoi South, is trying, but now he is in the second term and delivering nothing to Tinet Ward, only measuring in some major wards, leaving aside Tinet in terms of development. He also says that some public schools that have run for almost 12 years and have not been registered. Also, the last mile connectivity has not been initiated in the ward. And so he's saying that, their hopes, are all, kind of, he's disappointed. Ahija Atola says, yes, Honorable Dick Oyugi Maungu. I'm not so sure where that, from which constituency he's representing, but he's saying he's doing a good job over there. Doreen Auma Jalango has done nothing. I think she meant here bursaries to refill forms. Zikapotelea kwa hewa. That is what they're saying about their members. So not our words, but yours, your views. So thank you so much. Once again, do get your, your reactions coming. We'll still be sampling some of them within this particular program. So O'Brien, that is what they're saying.
Very good indeed. Asante Sana, Maria Yambo on the scoreboard. Of course, we'll be touching base with you so that you can give us more reactions from members of parliament. Well, from the public. We are in the company of Lois Mwakamba. She is she's in charge of communications at Mzalendo Trust, as well as Professor Fred Ogola and Whitney Misheni. Our conversation continues. Fred, you're saying that some members of parliament, and especially more so, the first-timers, some of them, they do not understand the rules of the house, okay, the standing orders, the laws of the house and all that, and all things. And so part of the reasons why they don't talk so much is because they are afraid that they're going to be ruled out of order. But if your argument holds any water, I remember on the 25th of August, that was last year, the National Assembly, did a sensitization exercise, and more than 300 members of parliament, were taken through the rules of the house and the rules of engagement in the house. And so it is proper to say that a proper induction, is usually carried before new members of parliament are sworn in. So is the argument right?
Well, O'Brien, let me remind you to the one thing that looked like a joke when His Excellency the President met his member of parliament in Naivasha in Kenya Kwanza. And he told them, he wanted them even to learn etiquettes, how to hold a spoon, how to eat. I'm sure you hear that. You can even get that clip from KBC. And in fact, people are laughing, but I'm telling you that actually he's very right that some people are very green on this matter. But even to look about the issue of induction, O'Brien, all of us went to school, and all of us are taught by the same teacher. Why do some children get D, some get E, while some get A? So we talk about the issue of the input. What's the output? The input is the induction. The output, some people are the same. Some people, whether you give them food to eat, they look the same even after eating. So these guys were given induction, but even after the induction, they just look the same. And then thirdly, I'm sure, O'Brien, we've been within these corridors of Parliament. Even that time I was there when guys were debating the finance bill. You see people debating inside there, others are busy on the corridor with phones, either they are doing other things. Just the same way in school. Some people, when people are learning, either they're in the toilet or they are walking towards the canteen. It's the same thing that happens in Parliament. So even if they were given induction at the safari park, we do not know how much of them do. Because me, I'm carrying in front of the house. I've listened to one whole proceedings. In one proceedings, the speaker says more than 20 times out of order. And these same people went through induction.
You follow these proceedings on KBC?
I have followed. I've followed them sometimes just for the sake of knowing what happens. Remember, Brian, I wanted to become a member of Parliament before, so I wanted to say, how what would happen in Parliament? So if member of Parliament being ruled out of order several times, there are those out of order where someone knows what to do, but they're trying to be rude or trying to do something just for the sake of politics. But there's whereby somebody is clearly out of order because actually they have not followed the standing orders in Parliament.
Very well.
So I'm more concerned about output. I don't think whether Mzalendo is more concerned about input or output. Me, as a strategist, I don't get excited by input.
I can see Whitney is nudging or nodding. Are you in agreement with what Prof is saying?
After he qualified his statement, I do concur with him partially. But I do believe that the biggest problem of the current parliament and the parliaments before is the CDF. The CDF last year, sometime in September, was ruled by the apex court, that is the Supreme Court, that it was illegal and unconstitutional as it currently is formatted. I do believe that parliamentarians have taken the core mandate, which is legislation, oversight and representation. They've taken that as a back burner, and the main concern as of now is the CDF. After the Supreme Court ruled it to be unconstitutional and illegal, we saw that the Treasury still went ahead and disbursed those funds. I do believe that CDF is what's making the parliamentarians do a shoddy job in their core mandate, and I do believe that the CDF should be taken to the county governments, the executive, or also just the national government, because I do believe that if we continue with the CDF, I do not think that the parliamentarians will be independent or they will actually exercise their core mandate as is envisioned by the Constitution. Because as we see, if the CDF is being controlled by the parliamentarians who are meant to still oversight that fund, that poses a conflict of interest, and it also violates the separation of the doctrine of separation of powers, because that's the work of the executive to be handling public resources. So I do believe that Kenyans must have that conversation of totally removing the CDF from the parliamentarians and taking it to the national government or to the county governments. And secondly, I do believe that it's high time that Kenyans have a conversation about term limits for parliamentarians. We see that some parliamentarians, of course, we know that sovereign power belongs to the people and also the universal suffrage, but I do believe that it's high time as Kenyans we discuss the issue of term limits. I do believe that some members are constantly re-elected, probably because of using CDF as leverage. But when it comes to substantive issues, be it in the committee stage or the plenary contributions, they're doing a terrible shoddy job. So I think if we continue recycling these parliamentarians just because of CDF and the leverage that they use on it, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice, and I do believe that members of parliament deserve term limits.
Yeah. Mwakamba, yes. When you're drafting your report, do you also get time to talk to members of parliament and also get to hear from them what are some of the challenges? Like when you say that a certain member of parliament, did not speak or has not spoken in parliament for the last 8 months. Do you give them a platform to maybe try to understand why they never said anything? If at all they never said anything in
Yes,
parliament?
Absolutely. So that was a big conversation that came up in the previous parliament, where those who are ranked low would say that they are facing a number of challenges, be it that they're very new to parliament compared to experienced members. They don't know how to catch the eye of the speaker. And so what Mzalendo did then and also continues to do now is to work closely with parliament itself build their capacity, the capacity of members to understand the processes, to even identify opportunities that they can front bills. So it's gone further to being segmented, where we've engaged particularly women MPs, we've engaged youth MPs, and through engaging them as Mzalendo and other non-state actors, like-minded non-state actors, we've been able to even give them ideas on what issues could they table before Parliament, what's a low-hanging fruit that someone could bring before Parliament, so that even by the end of that 5 years, you have something to say that I left a legacy, this is what I contributed. But if you allow me just to address some things that Whitney and Dr. Ogola mentioned, that whatever they said kind of proves that it's important for members of Parliament to be in plenary and make contributions. Because if a member of Parliament rubbishes our report, for example, and says, vitu ni kwa ground, I'm doing development work, can they sit and look at how did CDF come about? It was a product of deliberations in Parliament, and it was passed. So you being present, you give an input and make and provide the backing for policy that then allows for things to manifest and work for Kenyans. Then whatever Dr. Ogola said, that he's even witnessed during the debate of the finance bill, some of the MPs not being there, or rather being outside of the chambers, and we even noted them when the voting was going on. What does it say to me as a constituent, as your constituent, that when this important thing is being debated that alters a lot of things in my life, you're not present there? What does it say? Do my needs, are my needs not a priority to you? Isn't that why I elected you into office? And so basically we are saying that we recognize that, yes, a lot of work goes into committees, but at the plenary, your voice matters. I have delegated that responsibility to you, the MP, and I expect you to be present and pass those things. Because even when if you even look at just a picture of Parliament, when the live proceedings are being broadcasted on KBC, for example, or the YouTube live stream, it looks like 50% of the seats are not occupied. So where are these members when these things are being debated? Today there was a debate on food and feed safety, for example. There will be implications, for example, on which authority would be looking at the quality of food, the standards. This is a whole debate that should concern every Kenyan, because we've seen cases of children experiencing food poisoning in schools. You've heard about toxic sugar making its rounds in the country. But then again, Parliament is clearly failing on its oversight role, because these authorities need to be reporting to Parliament and should not be getting away with such things. So yes, Parliament should, members of Parliament need to be in Parliament when these things are being discussed.
And again, when you look at Parliament, and I want to hear this from Ogola, bearing in mind that you harbored in the past some political interest. Is there any way, or is it possible to have favoritism in Parliament in terms of, giving preferential treatment to some members of Parliament over the others? Like, is it possible for you to see, like, there are certain members of Parliament who attract the eye of the Speaker more than the others?
First of all, I don't think this has been well, you can say it with evidence that is the case, but all of us, we have always had some members of Parliament complaining that there are some ruling them out of order, or asking them to walk out of the House, or not giving the chance to talk has been there, but I don't think there's any deliberate thing. I see these parliamentarians to be really friendly when they're in Parliament. And I even see sometimes, for example, if the Speaker, because the Speaker seat continue moving from one person to the other, sometimes you can even find somebody from another, let's say not the Speaker himself, but somebody representing the Speaker sharing, and I think there must be certain ways in which they do it. I think we cannot say overwhelmingly that can be a reason why someone can say, I have not been speaking because the Speaker has not been given a chance to speak. I think that's very rare, and I think that there's no legitimate claim around it. Nevertheless, whenever some things are very tough, there are moments when the Speaker sometimes comes in and says, no, so-and-so, you have to walk out. So maybe that's where people can spot bias, but I don't see it. But for me, the main bias that took place was that when Moses Wetangula, as elected speaker, ruled out that Azimio was not a political party and that they could not be majority in parliament, and they were using the parties like ODM and the rest to declare Azimio versus Kenya Kwanza, then Azimio was not majority. That was not Solomonic ruling, and I think that was a very big mistake that he made. And
that is water under the bridge.
Yes, and through the eyes of the public, some people lost legitimacy, so that the perception was that the parliament lost legitimacy at that very thing. And then after that, the subsequent thing they approved. There was issues with some members of the cabinet. It was approved as it was. There were some people who suggested that people find that there are so many reservations to serve in state offices. They just pass there. We have never seen a situation whereby Parliament actually oversighted executive, because if any decision, proposal from the executive is passed, then they are not oversighting the executive. And I'm looking at the word oversighting. No, oversighting has two words which are opposite. There's oversight to mean that you didn't actually, were not keen enough. But there's oversight that you have to prevent. So on the preventive measures, we have not seen, for example, look at the issue of the data protection. They were coming up to set up something after it has happened now, while when was leaving. So the issue of oversighting, there's a time when Parliament used to even, what you call, whistleblow. I remember the Artur Sagrasian and Margayan, those things were being, they were pointing out some things before they happened. But here, once people's iris has been collected, now you're telling us you're setting up a commission of inquiry, and they are now not here anymore.
And the data has been captured already.
So oversight doesn't mean you don't see and react later. Because there's oversight where you need to see before they happen. And then secondly, for me, I'll be looking at has corruption in public sector reduced because of Parliament? For me, those are important variables.
Those are important.
Another variable is, have people been able to access more education? For the time when, I'm sure when there was this kind of the drought, the extreme drought, was there anything Parliament passed to mitigate these issues? Now guys are talking about the education. Now guys are complaining that the executive has defunded education and came with the metrics you can't understand. I don't know, people with extreme need, people who are needy, more needy. It's not clear, and even the process of applying for it. Has Parliament come up with a way on which this can be explicated? For me, this could be oversight, but if the Parliament has become friendly, just almost too friendly to the executive, then they should actually look at how are they going to be seen as the voice of the people.
Very well. I want to hear this from Wakamba. For the last 9 years, I mean, Mzalendo Trust has been carrying out these studies and these reports. And when you look at, for example, the National Assembly, there are about 35 bills that are pending. That are supposed to be debated. So how would you rate these? Is it a good performance? Is it a bad performance? Is it average?
I mean, you have to consider the journey of a bill, that it takes a long time from the pre-publication stage to being read the first time, public participation, so on, until passage. So there's that consideration of how much time it takes. I wouldn't say that it's an indicator of them working poorly, more so the output. What kind of bills have they been passing? And from the 35 bills that have been considered, 8 have been passed. And almost all of them, actually all of them, have been the executive agenda. I mean, you have the finance bill. The government has to figure out a way to raise revenues. You have the division of revenue bill. You have there was an independent, an IEBC bill that was dealing with the selection panel, that would again pick out the commissioners. Again, this was a priority area coming straight from elections, where there was a whole discussion about reconstituting the commission, etc. So the output as at this moment for the first year of the 13th Parliament looks largely like it's been, it's the executive agenda. It's not people's agenda. I mean, there have been good motions that have been discussed and passed about the cost of electricity, the high cost of electricity, for example, provision of free sanitary towels to girls, and that's a big issue among vulnerable communities. Such things have been passed, but then the question is, what happens when a motion is passed, for example? So the responsibility to Parliament is to act after they've passed decisions, they've made decisions, then what? That question of then what happens. And I should mention that there is a bill that was passed by the Senate and currently awaiting concurrence with the National Assembly. It's called the Powers and Privileges Bill, that would then compel public institutions to provide regular reports on what they're doing on recommendations that Parliament has given, because that's what is contained in a motion, so that all the work they're doing is not in vain. We're not here passing a motion and then we're not seeing it work to the benefit of the public. So those are the things that we need to consider when we're putting them out.
I have a question again to her, just shortly, briefly. Has the Mzalendo on the performance of Parliament helped to improve the performance of Parliament, according to you? And have you seen any learning lessons from Parliament after this report that makes some improvement?
Yes, I would say we've seen some change among parliamentarians themselves. I would use the previous Parliament as an example, where we had some MPs that were ranked very low as having not spoken, and they made the effort to reach out that, hey, I would like to
speak something.
I would like to make some input in Parliament. Help me, especially those who are just new members. I would like to package, I want to present this to Parliament. How do I do this? Do we help you draft a statement? Do we help you draft a bill, for example? Such things happen, but also the manifestation of it at election level. There are some MPs who've lost their seat by virtue of not having contributed in Parliament. And so we're seeing that increasingly citizens are also becoming interested in this role of parliamentarians, that we need you to speak in Parliament.
I would want to hear from you, because we're almost winding up now. You know, when you do your grading and you say that this member of Parliament, you know, spoke this time in Parliament, this member of Parliament never spoke any time, do you usually get any backlash?
Yes, of course we do. I mean, anyone, you don't want to be told that you're not doing a good job. There's the questions of who has sponsored you. Has another MP paid to be ranked very high? But then, of course, when we respond to them by saying that this information is informed by Parliament's official records, that we have not tampered with anything, we are not being partisan, then it's a moment for reflection as an MP that, okay, this is the truth. What do I need to do for the next 4 years if really it's important for you to be re-elected, but also for you to leave a legacy as a member of Parliament? And out of that, have you seen a situation whereby, you know, some members of Parliament, you know, are willing to work with you so that, you know, the true reflection, you know, can be captured? Yes, we have. There was a case where a member of Parliament gave a reason as to why they did not perform very well during a particular year. And the reason they gave was that they had been doing a lot of activities at the Pan-African Parliament. So then this question is, what are you doing at the Pan-African Parliament that is beneficial to the Kenyans? So again, it's what's your contribution as a member of Parliament and all your roles in that capacity. Very good.
But O'Brien, before you finish, this will not go. It is so important for the constituents to really know what's the role of their MP, because I heard the speaker speak in Parliament by saying, we are village ATMs. How well does Uzalendo Trust help the constituents to really understand what's the role of member of Parliament?
We do a lot of sensitization with the public, because we want members of, the constituents to also take agency of the fact that they have delegated this power to the members of Parliament, and they also need to get value for money as taxpayers. So we always remind them that these three roles are very key, and for them to also reflect on their demands to the politicians when it's campaign season, so that it's not about money, but what is it that you're promising and what's your plan during that tenure. Very well. Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, actually, we're almost coming to the tail end of this conversation, but not before we throw out, we sample, you know, two of our scorecarding questions. And now, the first question, which goes to the lady on my right. Is the Parliament playing its legislative role accordingly? That is the first question that goes to Whitney Micheni, is the Parliament playing its legislative role accordingly?
Not at all. I would, in a scale of 5, of course, I would rank them at 0.
0?
Yes.
Whoa.
The scale must have 1.
The scale must have a positive number.
Okay. 1. But,
you give them 1.
But parliamentarians are solely focused on the CDF, and I think it's time we abolish the CDF. As I've said before, the CDF needs to be anchored in the executive arm
and that's
of the
why
government.
You're giving it 1. Very well. And to Prof, is Parliament playing its legislative role accordingly?
The 13th Parliament has been a disappointment from the very beginning to the end. And therefore, I would give it the least figure available, and as I agreed, it's only 1. Because if you look at...
I hope you didn't copy from...
No. I only gave it 0. Actually, I raised it to 1.
All right.
So I believe that they have not been able to do their work because we've not felt them. There's no moment we have seen we've been saved by Parliament. We have only been hearing them trying to justify why they should make the decision they are making.
And that's why you're giving it 1.
Yes.
Very good. Mwakamba.
Yes.
Is the Parliament playing its legislative role accordingly? And this is that in the Parliament.
Okay. I would give them a 2 for starters.
You give it a 2?
Yes. And 1 is because as an institution, I would say that Parliament is working really hard to make sure that the systems work for members of Parliament to effectively represent. As for the members of Parliament themselves individually, there is a lot of room for improvement. There is a lot that needs to be done for the citizens to feel that actually we are being represented in Parliament by
that's
our
why you're
MPs.
giving it 2.
Yes.
Very well. And finally, are members of Parliament debating issues that are of concern to Kenyans? Prof.
Well, that is true because they actually, the way Parliament does business is really collecting issues that are really for people. That's the issue. Whether they are making the right decision about them, another story. So I'd give them a 2 on that.
You give it a 2, which is an improvement from the 1 that you gave them.
Yeah, because they do debate issues that are concerned about people. Whether they make the right decision or not, that's another story.
Very good. This is now to you, Whitney. Are members of Parliament debating issues that are of concern to Kenyans?
I would give them 1. They're debating, but when you look at the follow-ups of some, probably like when they're discussing the cost of energy or the cost of food, all those things, they just debate them, but it ends at debating. They do not pass any policies. They do not implement anything. So I think this legislature is a pure disappointment. I would give them the least rank available,
which is 1.
Yes.
All right. Today you're talking about 1s. What about Mwakamba?
Do I think that debating issues of concern? Yes, they are, but it's not reflecting in the vote, like Dr. Ogola has said. So would it be valuable that you have debated but not voted in a way that makes sense? Not really. So, yeah, 1.
You give it 1?
Yeah.
Very good. So it's a 1, it's a 2, and it's a 1. And it was a 2, a 1, and a 1. That is how we are closing it up. Marie, do you have any comments from the public?
Indeed, Brian, quite a number of comments, but unfortunately not be able to sample all of them. But I'll mention a few. Jared Na Mai Kefa on Facebook says, the question we asked you, has your member of Parliament, delivered according to your expectation? And he says, no, so far my Kibra member of Parliament, Mwalimu Peter Orero, has not delivered anything we can account on. He is even nowhere to be seen. Well, I only see him on TV news and during the maandamano, so that is his, view. Justin Ayunga says, Ngaribari Chache, nothing. He doesn't say what exactly he is dissatisfied with. Kipchirchir Cheboy, nilichagua David Kiplagat, but namwona kwa TV na Parliament buildings, sometimes Lower Moiben and Segero. So a dissatisfied constituent there, or a voter. Again, Duncan Arab Kimutai says, yes, KO South MP is doing commendable job. Gideon Kimayo, that is his sentiment. Those are his sentiments. Sheikh Kevin says, I don't think if we need members of Parliament, women reps or senators, again, that just shows you some of the dissatisfaction. So this is a mixed bag of people who are praising their members of parliament for a good job done, and some just saying probably it's just a matter of time and they'll be able to deliver. So once again, back at home, thank you so much for taking the time to interact with us on this scorecard and also, engaging us. And just as our able panelists have said, and I will put it to Mzalendo Trust that it's a commendable job that you're doing in terms of just enlightening Kenyans on what they should be looking out for in terms of the performance of their members of parliament. And just as Professor Ogola has also said, empowering the people, because the people have the power. So is it time, as Whitney asked, that Kenyans look into term limits for members of parliament? Because if there are no term limits, O'Brien, could that also be the reason as to why non-performance with no accountability, still rages on? So thank you so much once again. My name is Marie Yambo. O'Brien?
Very good indeed. Marie Yambo there, oozing wisdom tonight, and of course feeding us with more data. O'Brien Kimani is my name. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us tonight, of course, for your wisdom on the issues that we have. It's highly appreciated. We'll see you again on Tuesday, same time right here on KBC Channel 1. Stay right here just to know where the conversation is taking us next. From me and the rest of the Scorecard team, have a good night.
Thank you.
Parliamentarians with all my heart.
But this parliament is the one parliament.
Cheza Loto Moto.
Kwa majina naitwa Nick Wenwa, yangu ni Ngong. Loto nimekuwa nikicheza sasa ni miezi 3, mwakisha at least kwa siku kucheza kama mara 2 hivi. Kwa hivyo unaweza wasihi mzidi kucheza na muendelee kucheza hilo Loto Moto. Watu wanashinda.
Usisahau kucheza Loto Moto. Shinda milioni 2 kila siku kwenye M-Pesa. Chagua lipa na M-Pesa.